Good afternoon. My name is Alex Fitzpatrick. I write for Mashable, covering politics and policy from a digital perspective. My guest today is Kerry Lauerman. He was appointed editor-in-chief of Salon in November 2010 after serving as Washington bureau chief and culture editor and launching Salon's blog network, Open Salon. Prior to joining Salon, he worked as an editor at the New York Times Magazine, Mother Jones, and Forbes. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'd like to discuss today, I know we're about 3 weeks after the election. A few of us are maybe a little bit sick of it, but I think now is a good time to go back.
Some people are physically sick.
Some people are physically sick of it, yes. I'd like to go back and take a look at sort of how social media was used by not only the candidates themselves, but also reporters and people that were just following the campaign as voters or interested parties otherwise.
Yeah.
When you're watching TV for the past 3 or 4 months covering the election, they brought a lot of tweets and other social media into their own coverage. I'm wondering if you think that added anything to their coverage of the election.
No, I don't. I don't personally think that seeing tweets while you're watching a show or hearing a discussion is hugely useful. I think for the people, I think the relationship with Twitter and the media in general, it's been great for people who are producing and promoting a message, whether it's personal opinion, promoting a story, promoting a brand, whether it's a website or a news site or the individual person. So I think this election cycle in particular, we watched the networks, news sites, newspapers. I was home in Indiana actually, and I noticed these really interesting, really clumsy attempts to integrate Twitter into my parents' local newspaper, which made no sense at all. But it's all being washed out. Ultimately, I imagine those are going to fall away from the chyron at the bottom of cable news. But for right now, it's still great. For us, this election cycle, our social traffic grew. It's going to kill me if I get the exact stat wrong, but like 164%.
Right.
And the election is always great for us for traffic, but our overall traffic grew by like 90% since like May or June. And social was a huge part of that. And having a staff that had all been, particularly our political and our culture writers, who had really been dedicated building up their Twitter followings for several years was hugely important.
Now, you bring up individual reporters developing their Twitter following. I'm a huge Twitter junkie, really into it, tweet all day. And I'm wondering, I'd say 80% of what I tweet is relevant to my beat in some way, politics or technology policy, something like that. And other things are just other things I'm interested in, hockey, a funny joke, whatever it is. What do you think is appropriate for a reporter to tweet inside their beat and otherwise humanize their feed with jokes or other things like that?
Right. For a publication like Salon, where we're a news site, but we're definitely, I come from magazines. A lot of the people on staff come from magazines. So we do like our writers to come from a point of view. Like, it's not a really strict news voice. It's definitely an opinionated, colorful voice that we tend to hire. I think it's really important for them to be full, three-dimensional people wherever they are, whether they're on Twitter or on TV or any place else. So we don't have any restrictions on what you can say. There was a lot of that, as you know, during the political campaign this year with bigger news sites, big news organizations saying you cannot tweet about politics or anything off color. And I personally, I think that creates a sort of culture where you have these sort of pent-up frustrations, and then someone will get in trouble. It just comes out like a frustrated political id, of a reporter coming out when they're tweeting, and somebody will say something off color and get fired or lose their jobs. I think it's for us, it's the better route to go is to encourage people to be themselves everywhere. That doesn't mean that some of our writers haven't been a little too glib at times or haven't had to modulate something that they've said or walk it back a little after they've said it. I think that's the risk of Twitter, but that's also the benefit of it too, to get instant feedback on what they're thinking.
Sure. I'm wondering, when we're watching the debate, I was watching with full Twitter dashboard up. I prefer Hootsuite. That's just my choice. And you're seeing other people's analysis in real time of one of the debates that are happening. And with some of the debates, certain people were calling who won the debate when it was only half over. I'm wondering if you think that everybody watching each other's analysis impacted their own analysis, and you're no longer able to come up with an independent thought about who won the debate, how did it go, without other people's thoughts in your own head.
Yeah, I think that's I think that's really interesting. I think it does influence people. I think it does influence writers in a hugely serious way. I don't know. I mean, we've been throwing around the old A.J. Liebling quote ever since I've been at Salon, which goes back a while now, which is, what you strive for is you want to be faster than anyone who's better than you are and better than anyone who's faster than you are. And I feel like Twitter has just sped that up so fast. Mm-hmm. So, the idea of being faster than, a brilliant, pour me coffee tweet right at the moment in the middle of the debate, you just can't do that. Like the Dorothy Parkers of today are not being published in print. Like the person who's perfectly coming up with the sort of crystallized assessment of the moment, they're tweeting it, Right. And so if you're writing in any form, if you're writing a blog post or if you're writing an op-ed or you're writing a reported analysis, the pressure on you to be more nuanced and thoughtful and really smart and entertaining, I think Twitter has raised the bar in a really serious way. But I think the benefit of it is it sharpens your thinking as you go along. If you're reading, you're reading all the smartest people who are tweeting during an event. You're seeing a lot of the sort of mess get hashed out early, so you don't have to worry so much about that. And then you can take it into your own specific direction. So I think it's a huge help. I think the weird thing about Twitter that I noticed, the influence on the election this year, was how quickly memes would sort of explode and then crest. Like I feel like this is a dumb example maybe, but like Big Bird, was like a huge meme after I guess the second presidential debate, but it exploded 20 minutes into the debate. It's like within 6 hours it was already kind of dying on all the trends. And 4 years ago or 8 years ago, or to date myself, 12 years ago, when I was involved in my first presidential campaign, I feel like that would have been an issue that might have been brought up by certain op-ed columnists the next day, might have gained traction, and then a week later we might have still been talking about it. It might have been a story. But I think social in general just blows things up, into a white-hot frenzy much faster, and then they subside much quicker as well.
Now, that's a specific example, and PBS funding is an important issue, but perhaps not the most important issue of this election we just saw. So I'm wondering if you think the things that become memes, in my opinion, tend to be a little bit more on the silly side, because that's what a meme often is. Do you think that distracts people from what the core issues should be?
No, I actually think one of the great things about the debates in particular and social covering these kind of big issues is, at least from our perspective, it forced us to not do the sort of, forever political analysts have been criticized for just doing theater criticism, just sort of watching and coming up with their own knee-jerk assessments. I think it's much harder to do that, get away with doing that these days. You have to be substantial if you want people to come to your site. So for us, we were doing real-time fact-checking of all the debates, and was hugely popular. Had we, 4 years ago, had we done, the thing to have done 4 years ago would have been a piece fact-checking the candidates that ran the next morning that we had scrupulously put together the night before and overnight, then put it up, and it would have done fine. But
how difficult is it to fact-check in real time?
This year we had one, obsessive polymath of a reporter, Alex Eitzwald in D.C., who was able to do a lot of it just off the top of his head. And in fact, I think it was an advantage having one person like that rather than having to try to coordinate the work of a team. I think the Washington Post had a huge team doing it, and we did have a staff of interns who was feeding him stuff as well. But I think that's when you just really want to lean on the one person who you know has it at their fingertips,
Right.
and is really plugged in with the right people who are sending him stuff or her stuff.
Aside from fact checking in real time, when you're covering an event on Twitter, a lot of news feeds will be, here's what this guy said, here's what this guy said. I'm wondering, we're all watching that event. We don't need to see that in our Twitter stream. How do you add value through Twitter when you're watching an event that everybody else is too?
What we did, we did something that actually was pretty successful. We were hosting a live blog on our site from Alex Perrine, who we just think, and his fans think he's very funny. So he was a distinctive voice covering, and very, crazy intelligent. So he was the perfect voice to be covering it. And we were crossed. It wasn't a live blog that was tweeted. It wasn't like a tweetable live blog. But we were cross-posting periodically, cross-pollinating between Twitter and the live blog. And that drove a huge number of people to his live blog who might have just wanted the one particular voice that they were feeling some kind of affinity toward. And I don't know if that gets exactly to your question, but I think that at least gave, rather than, I found following Twitter during the debates both fascinating and kind of maddening because it was scrolling so quickly. Even my sort of political column on TweetDeck was just moving so fast that finding the ones that really mattered was difficult. So for us, it was about trying to target people to our own very curated feed.
Did you see anything on platforms besides Twitter that you were really impressed by this election cycle?
That's a really good question.
For instance, Tumblr did the live GIFing experiment,
Yeah.
which I thought was really, I'm not sure how much it added in policy substance or journalism per se, but I thought it was entertaining at least.
Tumblr's the only one I can really think of. But yeah, talk about white hot meme explosion, Tumblr. And that's another thing that I think affects traditional media or even new media, newish media. It's much difficult to kind of own memes or sort of be first on that stuff. So you have to approach it differently, more creatively.
You bring up owning memes. What did you think about, I know the Obama campaign in particular was pretty savvy as far as picking up, okay, this is a meme now, let's do something with it.
Yeah.
For instance, during the RNC, when Clint Eastwood went off and did whatever he did, the Obama campaign put up on Facebook this picture that showed the back of the president in a chair and something like, sorry, this chair is taken, or something like that.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quick, and it was speedy, and it was socially savvy.
Yeah, no, I think the Obama campaign was much better at the Romney campaign and just coming up with really, compelling visuals that people immediately wanted to just talk about. It was controversial, but the New York Times piece talking about that famous photo of Obama with the young black boy, and how emotional it was. And I know a lot of Republicans were furious about that Times story, even though it was a lovely story that, and a fascinating photo that went completely viral. That was just an example of them thinking about, using the medium to their advantage in a great way. Even yesterday when that great photo of Romney visiting Obama in the White House leaked out. It's a great Obama photo. It's just, he looks very relaxed, very confident, has his hand in his pocket. And Mitt Romney looks just like he wants to be anywhere else in the world, and, the Oval Office. I think they just have complete command over visuals.
Why do you think that is?
Well, we can make a lot of stereotypes about having a younger staff, and also tapping into. We were just talking about it in the green room before we came out, on how the Obama campaign seemed to tap in really effectively into this whole network of social scientists and behavior scientists. They had kind of a dream team of social scientists working with them on canvassing, but also how to respond to criticism. And I think it's good to have science on your side,
Yeah.
whether you're a candidate or a tech company or.
I'm wondering if you think the Obama team's sort of social science has any relation to the way that they, a lot of pundits following his victory argued that, a lot of his win was due very much to an understanding of the changing demographic. And do you see a relationship between their appreciation of social science and the campaign's appreciation of demographic science?
Probably. I don't know for sure, but I think that's a pretty interesting, and that seems like a really sound guess.
Now, just I'm wondering, back to Twitter and using Twitter as a reporter, what you realize is that not everybody who follows you on Twitter reads your column on your website, whether it's Salon or Mashable. That's been my experience, and vice versa. Not everybody who reads your stuff on your site reads your Twitter feed. And I'm wondering if, when you pick up on what's happening on Twitter, or if you get into sort of a clique of friends on Twitter that are also reporters, do you ever find that you're writing something, or a reporter is writing something for that Twitter audience without considering the actual audience on the site?
Yeah, I think that's a trap. But I think the one thing that I think we've become much smarter about is noticing, when I don't know. I think for us, and I think for a lot of media companies, Twitter is the perfect focus group, to try things out. I see it with my writers all the time. They'll kind of experiment with a line of thinking, and sometimes it drives me crazy because I want it on the site and I don't want it on Twitter because there's nothing we can do with that. And sometimes I know exactly what they're going to write about because I've been reading them on Twitter. But I think that it's also a chance to see when things really break out beyond that clique you're talking about of followers or the niche political reporters. Erin Carmone, who's one of our reporters who covers specifically women's issues and the intersection of women's issues and politics, was one of the very first people on the Susan G. Komen controversy of earlier this year when the foundation announced they were going to stop funding Planned Parenthood. And, she, for a reporter like Erin, she knew it was important. I think all reporters have difficulty sometimes telling, is it important to me and my beat, or is it a bigger story? And she was able to tell very quickly through Twitter that it was a much huger story than her clique. It wasn't just like her followers. It was, when she first started tweeting news of it, it just exploded. And so we had, I think we would have known pretty fast that it was a huge story regardless. But that was, a quick confirmation that there was going to be a big story and we needed to really, really focus on it. Now the converse of that, and I had, one of my political columnists will say he finds Twitter really intimidating, that it's sort of, even a couple of years ago, I think you could get away with being glibber and shriller on Twitter than you can now. People read tweets pretty regularly and they criticize dumb tweets. We have a feature, Dumb Tweet of the Day, which is very popular on our site. But I think it can have a slight chilling effect if you're kind of trying to test the waters on your thinking. I think people get a little freaked out or worried about saying something stupid, but I think that's probably healthy.
What would you tell a reporter now who's not fully committed to Twitter or social media in general going forward after what we've learned from Twitter's capabilities or social media in general, their capabilities in 2012?
Be smart. It's your name. Your name is on everything you do, and you can't really take it back, which a lot of people have learned the hard way. But it's an amazing way to extend your audience and your influence. I had one of my young reporters last year got booked on a cable news show because of a tweet. And it wasn't even really his tweet. It was like a headline from something else that he'd made a comment on.
Right.
And he was, I'm sure that the booker looked at the body of his work and realized he was legit and was a very smart young man. But it's an amazing way to extend your influence if you know how to use it correctly and smartly. So I think mastering social media is critical if you're particularly a reporter. I think reporters can leverage having a smart Twitter following the way they used to be able to leverage doing TV a lot, because tweets get circulated around potential sources can identify you as somebody who can make an impact, who will talk, who's legitimate, who's worth talking to. So I think it's just hugely important.
Excellent. Kerry Lauerman, Editor-in-Chief of Salon, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thanks.